I left your disability daughter at your home. I got a frustrating message like this from my sister over WhatsApp. I rushed home. There was May, crying her heart out alone in front of our house. I can't leave these kids with my sister anymore. I'm going to teach her what family really means. My name is Amanda. I'm a 43-year-old with a passion for baking. I've loved baking since I was a kid. Oh, so you must think I'm quite the expert, right? No need to brag. Of course I am top class. My kids once told me, "Mom, your chiffon cake is so dry. We'll help you make it next time," just to tease me. I admit I'm not good at chiffon cakes, but when I made muffins, my kids' friends were so impressed they wished I was their mom. And my kids gave me this smug look like, "See, Mom's awesome," so I'm not bad at baking. What I mean is, whether I'm good or bad at baking, it's fun to have these playful interactions with my kids. Even the smallest things become precious pieces of everyday life. That's what family is, or so I thought. But my sister's family was different. This story goes back a few years. During spring vacation, me and my family went back to my parents' home. While watching TV, my sister Kathy suddenly said, "Lately, there are a lot of kids with developmental disabilities. I wonder why." The TV wasn't even discussing developmental disabilities. My sister really just came out of nowhere with that comment. It wasn't just me. My mom and my husband also looked puzzled. Seeing this, I asked, "What's with the sudden comment?" "A colleague's child was recently diagnosed with a developmental disability. I heard that kids who are restless or bad at studying might fall into that category." I don't know much, but it seems like that could apply to a lot of kids. "I think maybe Sarah has a developmental disability." I was stunned. Sarah is Kathy's daughter, my niece. I've loved her since she was born, but she seemed like a normal kid to me. "Why would you suddenly think that?" I asked. "Compared to Ken, she's not as smart. She lacks language skills." "You're just like that too, you know." "This isn't a joke. It's like she has a poor memory," Kathy insisted passionately. I glanced at Mom, who also looked puzzled. My husband had the same confused expression. To be honest, we didn't know much about developmental disabilities back then. Our knowledge came from snippets on TV. We didn't know anyone with a developmental disability either. From what Kathy said, Sarah just seemed like an ordinary child. But since we weren't living with Sarah daily, we didn't have enough grounds to tell Kathy she was wrong. However, we had this gut feeling that Kathy might be overthinking it. When I told Kathy this, she said, "You just don't get it, Amanda." "I've been studying developmental disabilities and needed advice." It sounded more like she was complaining than seeking advice. But I thought, well, if she's really worried, she'll probably take Sarah to a doctor eventually. At that time, we all remained optimistic. But when we returned home again during the summer holidays, an incident occurred. "I knew it! Sarah does have a developmental disability." Kathy said this with a hint of excitement, and I felt uneasy. It was as if she was delighted that her prediction was correct, like she'd won the lottery. She almost seemed to enjoy it. I was worried about Sarah's future, thinking that if this were true, her life would change. "Did you take her to the doctor?" Mom asked, concerned. "No, I didn't, but I have proof." "Proof? Stop talking like you found a criminal or something." Mom scolded, but Kathy continued with her theory. "She's going to start elementary school next year, but she still can't write alphabet." "Well, she's still in kindergarten, so that's normal. Even my daughter, who just started school this year, still struggles with some alphabet." "That's because your daughter takes after you," Kathy said smugly, as if she was making a clever point. My husband and I were irritated by her attitude. Mom watched anxiously as if to calm us down. I held back my retort and took a deep breath. "Anyway, there's no need to rush. There are plenty of kids who can't write alphabet in elementary school. She'll eventually learn." Kathy frowned, clearly unsatisfied with my answer. "But Ken could read when he was in kindergarten, and he could write alphabet ages ago." "That's because Ken is a genius," I started to say, but stopped when I saw Sarah nearby. Ken is Kathy's eldest son and Sarah's older brother. He has been bright since he was little, able to read numbers on calendars and signs effortlessly. Ever since Dad casually said, "This kid is a genius," Kathy changed. She started pushing Ken into education. Ken had lessons 5 days a week and studied intensively at home too. I've never seen Ken play like a typical child. Everyone told Kathy that Ken needed more freedom, that he'd be better off with some space. But Kathy insisted it was what Ken wanted. Even Ken said he wanted to study more to make Mom and Dad happy. Everyone except Kathy and her husband knew this wasn't good for the child, but because Ken never seemed to resist, it was hard for those of us not in the immediate family to intervene. "Every child is different. You can't compare them." Kathy made a face at my words. Saying things like that only holds a child back. Kathy's husband, Tim, interjected smugly. There are elementary school kids who can't write alphabet right after starting school. I think it's rash to assume developmental disability based on that.
Then maybe those kids also have developmental disabilities. Oh, sorry, isn't your daughter one of those who can't write alphabet? Seems like she takes after her parents.
Sensing my annoyance, my husband Mike chimed in.
Well, from what I hear, Sarah seems quite capable. Oh no, she's totally incapable. She doesn't listen, she's restless, doesn't express her opinions, and struggles with group activities. She fits the symptom of a developmental disability perfectly.
When she plays with her daughter, she seems calm and listens well. From what I've seen, she doesn't appear to have any troubles with group activities.
You just don't understand, Amanda. Compared to Ken, who is 3 years older, she can't do anything. Ken could do so much more at her age.
Well, Ken is 3 years older. If he couldn't do anything at that age, then maybe you should take him to a doctor. I found myself thinking, what is this guy even saying as I stared at Tim?
From a medical perspective, Sarah clearly has a developmental disability.
Medical perspective? Tim, you're not a doctor.
I always say, my siblings graduated from a national university, so I'm smart.
I couldn't help but smile wryly. Tim always claims that because his siblings graduated from a national university, he's smart too, as if the only difference between them was passing or failing an exam. For the record, Tim graduated from a private university. His teachers even advised him not to take the National University entrance exam, but he ignored them, only to fail spectacularly. He ended up at his backup school and now manages a supermarket. Despite all this, Tim insists he's just as smart as his siblings who went to a national university. If you're thinking, what is he talking about, then your reaction is spot on. I found out much later that Tim was somewhat of an outcast, even within his own family. But having a professional look at her would be important. Mike subtly suggested a proper medical consultation for Sarah.
Well, I've already consulted with professionals, so we're good.
For a moment, a question mark seemed to hover above everyone's heads, except for Kathy's family.
What do you mean by professionals?
My husband asked cautiously.
Health programs on TV. They matched my observations exactly, so it must be accurate.
We all held our heads in frustration at Tim's unbelievably foolish words. Yes, the recent special was amazing. My colleague watched it and got worried, went to the doctor and was diagnosed with the exact illness they covered. It's not to be taken lightly, Kathy piled on. Seeing that, Mom said,
TV is just TV. Stop saying nonsense and take her to a real doctor.
Just stay out of our parenting and keep your opinions to yourself, you ignorant people. Kathy snapped back, and then stormed off with Tim and Ken, leaving Sarah behind. They left Sarah behind without even saying a word to her. Mom sighed deeply, saying,
If they're going to be so high and mighty, they should at least take proper care of Sarah.
Sarah's playing with my daughter, showing a smile, but she must have noticed her family left without her. I saw a brief look of disappointment across Sarah's face. So that smile must have been just for show, a brave front. Seeing Sarah like this made my heart ache. She shouldn't have to worry about us adults. I was more convinced than ever that she didn't have a developmental disability. A while later, Kathy and her family returned home in high spirits after some shopping. Mom, with a terrifying expression, asked,
Do you often go shopping like that, leaving Sarah behind?
It's just leaving her at home. What's the problem? You don't need to leave just Sarah at home. Why not take her with you? Because she doesn't listen. It's for discipline. Then discipline her, but don't just leave her behind without explanation. That's cruel.
With all due respect, we give Sarah proper meals and a good education, so why do you have to criticize us?
Tim jumped in to defend Kathy, and my husband and I immediately raised our voices. That's not the point.
Ugh, please, don't shout. It's noisy.
Tim acted like it was none of his business, showing he didn't think he had done anything wrong. I couldn't stand Tim's attitude any longer, so I spoke up, saying things like, we provide meals and education, as if it's some great achievement. Who would accept that as a reasonable defense?
This is our family matter, so please stay out of it, Amanda.
He glared at me. If you're going to say our family matter, then Sarah is my family too. She's my niece, and if she's been mistreated, I won't stay silent. You make it sound like every family leaves a child home alone. So have you ever left Ken alone at home? If all the children were equally left home alone, I might stay silent. Although leaving a kindergartner home alone isn't something I'm comfortable with, to be honest. My words left Tim speechless, and Kathy looked down. They'd never left Ken home alone. Their gestures said it all without words.
If you suspect she might have a developmental disability, it's even more responsible to leave Sarah home alone.
My husband voiced his concerns, and Mom and I nodded in agreement. That's why we're teaching her to stay home alone, because she can't do it now. Mind your own business. Kathy slammed her hand on the table. We tried to persuade Kathy and Tim for about 2 hours, but the discussion went nowhere, and we ended it for the day. Needless to say, Kathy and Tim left for home earlier than planned the next morning. Even during their stay, Kathy and Tim showed a clear favoritism towards Ken. For example, at meals, if there was Ken's favorite shrimp on their plates, they'd say, "You can have this too," but never did the same for Sarah. Instead, they'd tell Sarah to give her shrimp to Ken. Sarah, used to this, reluctantly complied with her parents' wishes. I'm sure Kathy and Tim saw this as a lack of opinion or willpower on Sarah's part. But if speaking up never works, of course she'd stop trying. There were many other glaring issues. They promised to buy games only for Ken. All conversations centered around Ken, and Sarah was often left out. I wanted to lecture them every time, but thinking about how Sarah might feel held me back. That's what led to that family meeting. Since then, my husband and I have been discussing more frequently about how to help Sarah. One day, my sister suddenly came over with Sarah without any prior notice. "Could you take care of Sarah just for today?" she said. It was so sudden that even Sarah looked bewildered. She probably understood better than anyone how inconvenient this request was for us. Sarah even said, "I could just play in the park. I don't need to go to Auntie's house." Without asking too many questions, we agreed to take care of Sarah that day. A few hours later, Kathy came back to pick up Sarah as promised. "Thanks for taking care of her," Kathy said, apologetically. Even she seemed to feel a bit guilty about the sudden request. That's fine, but why so suddenly?" "Ken's friends and their moms were coming over, you know. With Sarah around, well, you know." "Know what?" "Ken's friends are from his extracurricular activities, and many of their families are doctors or from wealthy backgrounds. It'd be embarrassing if they found out about a sister with a developmental disability. That's why I hid Sarah here." Kathy laughed, sticking out her tongue. I couldn't hide the frustration that rose within me at Kathy's smile. You know, whether Sarah has a developmental disability or not, it's wrong for a parent to feel ashamed of their own daughter. "It's a fact, so what can I do?" Unbelievable. Instead of trying to impress other moms, why don't you be a more sincere parent to your children? "I don't want to hear that from someone who's only raised one child," Kathy retorted sharply, her face contorting in anger. She roughly grabbed Sarah's hand and dragged her to the car. I can't forget the sad look Sarah gave me as she glanced back for a moment. Not long after that, Kathy and Tim showed up at our house again with Ken and Sarah in tow. "Once again, you've shown up without any notice. What do you want this time?" "Can you take care of Sarah?" "And Ken is okay with this?" "Don't worry about Ken. We're going on a 2-day camping trip." "So you're planning to go have fun leaving your daughter behind? That's why you're here to drop her off, isn't it?" "I've told you before. It's just this once, so what's the big deal? It's not just for fun. Ken needs to build connections with his wealthy friends, so don't interfere." "I told you before, I don't think kids need that kind of networking. Ken should be given more freedom." "Of course it's necessary. I'm dealing with all these complicated mom dynamics for Ken's sake. What would you know, Amanda?" "I don't know what you're thinking, but I was a kid once too. I can imagine how kids feel." "Ken is different from other kids. He's a genius." This conversation is getting nowhere. I agreed to take Sarah, but insisted they call before picking her up, and made sure they promised to pick her up exactly at 10:30. They seemed a bit reluctant, but agreed. Without even saying goodbye to Sarah, Kathy and Tim got in their car with Ken. What irresponsible parents, I thought. Fortunately, our daughter was thrilled to have Sarah over and played with her the whole time, so Sarah didn't seem lonely. To my daughter, Sarah was like a little sister. She even said things like, "I wish you were part of our family." Words that adults wouldn't dare to say lightly. Sarah seemed to enjoy her time with us, saying she didn't want to go home. The next morning, the promised time passed, but there was no contact from Kathy. She didn't come to pick up Sarah either. We called her phone, but it didn't connect. We started worrying if there had been an accident or something. Then in the evening, Kathy and Tim showed up at our house with no apology, just smiling. "Thanks for taking care of her." "I told you to call before coming over, didn't I? And what's with not keeping the promised time?" My tone grew harsher in front of Sarah, but I couldn't hold back. "Don't be so picky. We came to pick her up, didn't we?" "That's a given. Don't just do things carelessly after leaving your child with someone." What's with you lately? You're always irritated. Is it menopause?" Tim laughed loudly at Kathy's light remark. What an annoying couple. "I don't want to keep saying the same things, but you guys need to rethink how you deal with your kids."
We're thinking about it. That's why we have Ken doing all these activities. Unlike your daughter,
who doesn't do any. We respect our daughter's wishes because she said she didn't want to. Well, we're respecting Ken's wishes too, right, Ken? You enjoy your lessons and studies, right? Kathy said, and Ken nodded unconvincingly with a forced smile. See, even Ken agrees. Anyway, I'm tired of reneging. We'll take Sarah and leave. Wait a minute, we're not done talking. Kathy forcefully dragged Sarah and pushed her into the car. Tim didn't listen and drove off, leaving us behind again. Feeling furious, I went shopping the next day when I got a text message from Kathy. Hey Amanda, you love Sarah, right? What's this about all of a sudden? Of course, I care about her. She's my niece. Great, perfect. Consider her your daughter from now on. I left her at your doorstep. I didn't see anyone at home, so you should get back soon. She might be crying alone. The message ended, and I was dumbfounded by the lack of seriousness. I hurriedly called Kathy, but she didn't answer, as if her phone was turned off. Was she joking? But if she was serious? Feeling a terrible sense of foreboding, I rushed back home, and there was Sarah crying loudly in front of our house. She had her face buried on the ground, not caring about her surroundings, crying with her back hunched. I had never seen Sarah like this before. Sarah! I ran up and hugged her. She clung to me, crying her eyes out. I didn't even need to ask what had happened. Kathy still wasn't answering her phone, and Tim's phone seemed to be off too, so it was clear this was their doing. Kathy said Sarah would be my daughter from now on, meaning they weren't coming back for her. I held the crying Sarah tightly again and made a firm vow that I would never forgive that couple, and that I shouldn't. Fine, I'll gladly take Sarah in. Within a week, my husband and I, along with my mother and mother-in-law, went to Kathy's house to confront them. Our purpose was clear, to get formal consent to make Sarah our legal child. The mothers were there as witnesses. Recently, my husband and I had discussed taking Sarah in, even if it took time. We had some concerns about how it would go bringing another child into our home when we already had a daughter. But those worries vanished when we saw how well the kids got along when Sarah stayed over. Sarah even said, "It's hard living at home. I want to be your child, Auntie." We were more than ready. To our surprise, Kathy and Tim readily agreed. Less burden for us. They seemed almost delighted as they filled out the paperwork. A few days later, Sarah officially became our daughter. 3 months later, Kathy suddenly appeared at our house. What do you want? Can you return Sarah? No way. What's this about all of a sudden? Please, I just found out she's actually a genius. What are you talking about? Kathy, looking pleased with herself, began explaining eagerly. Apparently, a friend of Ken's mom asked her. I heard you have a little sister, but we never see her. I tried to brush it off, saying Ken didn't have a sister, but then the mom says something I didn't know. Your daughter is such a talented artist. Her painting won the kids' art contest and was displayed at the bank. It was a painting like a prose with beautiful colors. Kathy was speechless at her words. No wonder. She probably didn't even know Sarah liked drawing. She had even snatched away Sarah's crayons during our summer visit, saying, "Stop drawing so much." When she told me this story, I was shocked and couldn't help but laugh. Why are you laughing? It's not funny. Of course I'd laugh. I've been saying from the start, Sarah doesn't have a developmental disability, and I'm the one who submitted her drawing to the contest. What? Actually, the preschool wanted to submit it because it was so good, so I just said go ahead. I heard they've been suggesting this to you for a while, but you never paid attention, so Sarah's opportunities for growth were lost. Even the teachers seemed disappointed. You sent Sarah to this famous preschool known for nurturing kids' talents, but you were only interested in academic achievements. You weren't listening at all. So Sarah was already showing her abilities, but you kept stifling her potential. What a waste. Oh well, just give Sarah back. Kathy made a demanding gesture with her hands. Even though she's my sister, she's so clueless I couldn't help but smirk. We've already completed the adoption process. It's not a matter of giving her back. Sarah is both our child now. If she wants to return to your house, I can't stop her. Oh, she'll definitely choose us. Kathy smirked triumphantly. Really? Let's find out. Sarah, come here. When I called Sarah, who was playing inside, she came running over, calling out, Mama! She had combined Mom and Auntie into a new nickname for me. It made sense, since I was both her aunt and her new mom. When Kathy tried to approach Sarah, Ken suddenly stepped in front of her. Ken, why are you here? Don't you have your lessons now? Ken's body trembled at Kathy's words. Our daughter was behind them, watching Ken and Sarah worriedly. Not long after we took in Sarah, Ken started coming to our house to play. He told us it was because his piano lesson was nearby. He wasn't really going to his lessons. He was just coming to our house. Why didn't you tell me? Lessons aren't cheap. Don't waste Ken's time with silly games. He's a genius. He doesn't have time for this. And that's the problem. Ken cried his eyes out the first time he came to our house. He said he hated his life. But he knew you'd be sad if he said that because you've spent so much money on him. Understanding this, Kathy tried to scold Ken, but I quickly interjected. Stay quiet. Don't you understand how Ken feels? He's been suffering every day, unable to speak up because you kept imposing your ideals on him. I've always told you to pay more attention to your children. I'm doing everything for Ken. But look at the result of your efforts. No one sees you as a mother anymore. Kathy was at a loss for words. So let's wrap this up. Just go home. Don't come back. Wait, Amanda, I know you want to keep Sarah because she's a genius, but... No, that's not it. I love Sarah whether she's talented or not, and I won't leave her with someone who only values kids for their talents. I practically pushed Kathy out the door and slammed it shut. For a while, we could hear her sobbing outside, but we completely ignored her. Later, I heard that Kathy didn't tell her mom friends that she gave her daughter up for adoption, instead saying Sarah was staying with her parents abroad. Her elite mom friends started gossiping, saying something's weird about that family. After that day, Ken also seemed to have given up on his parents and stopped coming home. Instead, he stayed at my mother's house. Ken didn't come to our house because he didn't want to cause us any trouble and thought staying with Grandma would be easier if any legal issues arose. Whether his reasoning was right or wrong, it showed how smart he was to think so far ahead. After much conflict, Ken ended up living with my mother. With 2 children gone, Kathy's house became even more scrutinized by the neighbors. Tim blamed Kathy for their social downfall, saying it was because of her poor parenting. Tim, in return, was ridiculed by his own family for not being able to manage his household, which seemed to increase his anger towards Kathy. To us, they were both equally to blame. After a year of arguing, the couple divorced. Kathy didn't want to end up alone in her old age, so she begged her kids to stay with her, but they refused outright. Today, Kathy lives alone, and Tim has returned to his family where he's treated poorly, laughed at as a man who can't even manage his life. Both of them will likely live out their days in isolation, ignored by everyone. Since then, my family and my mother have built a 2-family house to live with Ken and Sarah. As they grew older, the children became quite rambunctious, and along with our daughter, they caused a lot of commotion daily. Since Ken moved in with my mother, he's quit all his lessons. Of course, we asked Ken what he wanted to do and made the decision based on his wishes. He said he didn't like any of his lessons. Now he plays games with Sarah and our daughter or plays pretend. He's shown great care as a big brother. What surprised us was that Ken's grades didn't drop at all, even though he stopped studying altogether. When Sarah started elementary school, we noticed she was the same type. It takes her time to grasp things, but she's fundamentally smart. Neither of them studies, but they're both good at it. So our daughter, being the only non-genius among the 3, jokingly decided to master being the fool. I told her, no, you need to study a little. Ken, the oldest, seemed to be helping her with her studies, so I think it'll be fine. I'm grateful, especially in this day and age, to avoid the need for tutoring. Ken excels in academics, Sarah in arts, and our daughter, inspired by them, has developed an interest in many things and become quite a good cook despite her young age. Why baking, you ask? Baking has always been my hobby, but I've never had a knack for presentation. Sarah would often say, "It looked better this way," and my daughter, watching from the side, started following Sarah's advice, honing her skills. Now my daughter is quite skilled in the kitchen. As for me, I'm mostly the one eating their creations along with my husband. My mother enjoys watching us and often taking pictures. Ever since more people started living with us, photography has become her hobby. It's only been a few years, but everyone's lives have changed drastically. I feel like there are more smiles all around. The loan for our 2-family house has increased, but the happiness it brings makes it all worthwhile.